Okay, folks, there's an image that's been making the rounds on Twitter. Here's an example of a tweet about it. Here's a closer look at it. What you're seeing here is a DNS and hosting breakdown of the servers that WikiLeaks is using to host their site and their name servers and their email server. This image suggests that several of the servers that WikiLeaks is using are based out of Russia. This has interesting implications. I did some research into verifying all of those DNS and whois data facts. That's available on my website. I started by simply taking the domain names and subdomains that were researched and using the dig command to backtrack what IP addresses are backing each of those in turn. This is the sort of tabular data that comes out of the dig command. It breaks down where it gets the data, what authority it bases it on, and shows all of the IP addresses that are found to be backing it. And you can see each domain. I found a series of IP addresses and listed them, and then ran whois on each one, and then geo-IP'd them for geolocation to verify that the listed location matched the actual location that the IP address is found to be located in. As you can see here, we've got Solar Communications, we've got Blix Solutions, we've got LeaseWeb, and we've got Hostkey. And all of the IP addresses wound up matching to one of those four companies. Interestingly, one of the Hostkey servers, the first IP address listed for the ns4.wikileaks.org domain, claims to be in Amsterdam. If you actually expand out the whois database, you look right here, you can see that it is claiming to be on Tussen de Bogen in Amsterdam. But if you take a look at the geo-IP lookup, the result gives us coordinates that match to Moscow. So that's rather interesting that you've got a false location, and the only provider that WikiLeaks is using that practices this is Hostkey. Now, of these providers, there's Solar Communications. They're only using one server from them, and it's one of their name servers. There's LeaseWeb, which has some questionable connection to Russia. They've advocated for more partnership with Russia in the past, and they have Telecom, which resells some of their services, and there may be more connection, but I haven't found evidence of that yet. There's Blix Solutions out of Norway, which Blix Solutions seems to be just a standard, young, agile, flexible ISP/hosting business, and they're running 5 servers for WikiLeaks. But then the interesting one is Hostkey. They're a server, cloud, co-location hosting company, and they're based out of Moscow. They've got an additional data center in Amsterdam, and they falsely list one of their servers as being in Amsterdam when it's actually in Moscow. Hostkey appears to be owned by Peter Chayanov, judging by whois data and listings about the company. Chayanov has deleted his Twitter account and deleted all the content on it, and seemed to do this just as discussion was breaking about his connection to WikiLeaks. He's connected to the Russian hacker community through his company hosting sites for various Russian malware and hacking tool sites, and he's also connected to the Russian surveillance technology community by virtue of starting a business with Alex Myadov, who was an engineer for MFI Soft and co-founded a company with Chayanov. You can verify this with Myadov's CV, which was posted on an open source project of Myadov's. You see there, MFI Soft right there. Hostkey is hosting a wikileaks.org server and a server on 2 of their name servers. And this gives us a bit of potential impact. Name servers are how you find out where you're trying to get to on the internet when you put in a domain name. If I ask for wikileaks.org in my web browser, the DNS request is sent out to a name server, to a domain name system server, which proceeds to ask a name server higher up the chain, and so on and such forth until it gets to the canonical name server run by whoever owns the domain that says this IP address is where you go to get wikileaks.org. So name servers are basically how you get directions on the internet. They tell you what IP address to go to when you ask for a domain. If a hostile party controlled a name server, then it would allow them to specify that people should go to an alternate location. This could be dangerous. More interesting, however, is the fact that an actual canonical server for WikiLeaks is controlled by the Hostkey system. The problem with this is that Hostkey has physical access to the server that they are hosting for WikiLeaks, which means that any data that is stored in the clear on that server is accessible to Hostkey, and thus Chayanov, and thus potentially the Russian surveillance community. A full copy of WikiLeaks SSL certificate, the private key that they use to sign their secure web connections, is stored on that server. It has to be stored on that server in order to serve secure connections signed with that key. In short, any connection that is secured with WikiLeaks' private SSL key could quite easily be monitored and recorded and decrypted by the Russians. Julian Assange has an interesting stance on Russia. There has been no indication that WikiLeaks has ever leaked anything that is detrimental to Russian interests. Furthermore, Assange has actually been quoted as arguing that Russia doesn't need WikiLeaks. He's argued that they have a free enough press and a strong enough critical press that they just don't need WikiLeaks, and that there's just too much competition for what WikiLeaks would be doing. There has been quite a bit of investigative journalism in the West. Perhaps not as much as we might like, but there has been plenty. But that has never stopped Assange from leaking about the West. Russia arguably has a good deal less investigative journalism going on there, but for some reason, Assange doesn't think they need WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks first signed up for these servers with Hostkey about a week before the Guccifer 2.0 leaks were released on the WikiLeaks site. It's just an interesting bit of timing. All of this suggests that there could be a more meaningful connection between WikiLeaks and Russia than we might like to think. This being said, we don't know the full meaning of all of this because we don't have enough data to verify it all yet. We know there is some kind of connection. We know there's a good potential for harm, but we don't know what has or has not been done with that potential yet. More research will need to be done on this. That will create a massively problematic situation for our rights to pursue dragging governments and corporations kicking and screaming into the sunlight. Find petitions, write your congresspeople, do anything you can think of to discourage the US government from pursuing this. I'm Silurius. Thanks for watching.